Welcome to Conversations with Writers. I'm Andy. I'm a writer, and this is an educational YouTube series meant to catalog writing strategies and philosophies through conversations with other writers. Trace Mannewitz was raised in Texas and Nebraska and has since lived all across the U.S. After graduating from BYU, he moved to San Francisco and then to New York City, and is now happily living with his wife, their dog Riley, and 3 cats, Scout, Jake, and Nymira, in Kentucky. Trace loves to cook, snowboard, and play board games. And this is my conversation with Trace.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing so well. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So what are you working on now, and what motivated the project?
So right now, it's actually a very exciting time at work because the marketing agency that I work at, its 10-year anniversaries this month. It's either the 30th or the 31st. But a lot of the projects that I'm working on and a lot of the writing that I've done this month has been around that and around telling the story of this company that has, despite a lot of expectations, made it through its first 10 years. And that's super exciting. As far as motivation goes, it's the part of the project that I like the most is that it's really kind of telling the story of one for the first, I think, 7 years of the company. This could essentially be the story of one person. There was other people on the team, there's other people involved, but this was telling the story of how one person kind of essentially wanted to follow in her father's footsteps and create something new, and how that willpower kind of came to be across the past 10 years.
What have you learned about yourself through writing?
So over the course of my life, the level and type of writing that I've done has varied a lot. There was a point in my life where I was doing a lot more creative novel-esque writing. There was a lot of poetry, and then as I became more and more involved in my career and began writing for a paycheck versus writing for fun, it became a lot more technical. It became more focused on conveying very physical thoughts and ideas and being persuasive rather than just telling a good story or conveying emotions, feelings, or thoughts. And the transition from being very internally exploratory to being essentially writing as a part of society taught me a lot about how I view both my writing and how I view writing as a way of showcasing myself to the world and being these are my talents, these are what have gotten me here. It's interesting to, every writer's best or favorite and least favorite thing to do is to go back and read old pieces, old writing. But I always find it interesting because it showcases a very direct path of growth and maturity through consistent writing over the years.
So how does your creative writing experience inform your approach to technical writing?
That's a good question. This is a subject I'm really passionate about. I stand by the fact that no matter what you are writing, maybe in the event of some law stuff that's different or medical, but 95% of the writing I think that is best structured in telling a story. If you're trying to convey your brand history or brand story, the best way to capture people's attention and to have people understand and become invested in that information is going to be through telling it as a story. Attention spans are fraught and heavily competed for nowadays. It's not as easy to just be it is a guarantee that I will capture everybody's attention long enough for them to make it top to bottom of whatever piece I'm writing. And that's true not even for technical writing. That's true for everything. I have no doubt that the amount of books finished nowadays is just fewer than it was before because it's more difficult to capture somebody's attention for the full lifespan of a piece of writing. And so to write that, no matter whether you're writing creatively, whether you are writing technically, you have to write in a way that captures attention. You have to write in a way that is engaging and relatable whenever possible, and that makes people want to finish reading, not feel obligated to, or not feel like they can just drop off and feel like they got the gist of it.
Absolutely, I completely agree. The one of the most effective ways to persuade any kind of audience, no matter what you're doing, is reliance on that story, because that's what we connect to. That's what we respond to.
Exactly. I think it's interesting that in Christian Western Christian society, parables, and that is the way that in the Bible that like Jesus taught, and like that is like it's been a teaching method for millennia, that it is like the most effective way. That's always what I took from like Bible school or whatever. I was like, hey, look, this is like, look at how effective this is. Oh, I'm supposed to pay attention to the things inside. Okay, well, we'll do that later.
Spoken like a true writer, always paying attention to craft first.
Just being like, what was the story about? Couldn't tell you, but it's not what he was doing.
What's the role or responsibility of writing for you? What keeps you generating material? Why write?
That can, depending on what day you ask, that can be a difficult question. I won't lie and sit here and be like, well, it's just the passion for the craft that gets me up every morning and like really gets me out the door. Because there are a lot of days where there's nothing I want to do less than churn out even more content for the internet that may or may not get seen, but is ultimately like trying to achieve a goal for one of our marketing clients. But I think after all this time, there is still some aspect of, even within technical writing, I think that there's still enough self-exploration and in my case, competitiveness to always create and to create something new and to really like leave a mark, right? I joke a lot that we live in a time where it's like too late to explore and discover new areas of the earth, but like too early to like explore new areas of space or whatever. There's a more beautiful way of saying that, but that's the gist. And I feel like writing and creating something new, I wish I was a talented artist, but writing is like my way of like discovery. That is like the main vehicle that I get to use to learn and to see the world and to see the world in like a new perspective.
When you're struggling to write for whatever reason, what do you do to help get yourself back to the page?
There's a lot of writers that are going to hate me for this. I am a big believer in fully outlining a page. If I'm writing not for me but for other people, aka do I have a deadline that I need to hit? And I will absolutely set up a schedule and a deadline. I will be like, I need to have paragraphs X, Y, and Z, or the main bones, or this chapter done by this date. And like, how am I going to accomplish that? Let's break it down into pieces. And eventually I break everything down into small enough pieces that then it becomes just a matter of like connecting the dots and fully like fleshing out the kind of the bone structure that we've set up. This was how I got through college a lot. There was many times where I was like, all right, we got to write, 10 pages on X subject. Okay, let's break it down into what are our 3 main ideas. Within those 3 main ideas, what's our 3 supplemental ideas or secondary ideas, and then on and on and on until like I'm looking at my outline that's damn near 10 pages, and then I'm like, all right, let's just turn this into words, and then we get this out the door. A deadline also helps. having a definitive like, oh, you have to have this done by this date it's helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. Outlining is a wonderful resource to help you not only see what you need to get on the page, but to also help balance out that information. And that's something that's really critical when you're thinking about the attention span or the limited attention span of an audience, right?
I work with a couple writers at our company, and one of the things that I harp on a lot with them is many of them are very talented and can write technically correct. Very few of them have grammatical issues, very few of them have tense issues or whatever, but oftentimes the biggest issue is through structure or prioritization of ideas. And this is another big aspect if we want to talk about the difference between creative and technical writing. In creative writing, it can be very prudent to bury the lead or have the main idea be something of a discovery that the reader can make for herself. The issue or the idea that I keep harping on for our writers is that we have to make the main idea first. We have to like structure it in such a way that like it's the inverted triangle where like the most important idea has to come first. So you have to read that, know exactly what you're getting into, and then you can get into the details, into the details, into the details, so that anybody who reads the beginning can take the understanding and be like, okay, I understand what this piece is about. And if it's for me, if it's what I'm looking for, then I can move down to the next step, to the next step, to the next step until, okay, I've accomplished what this piece is wanting from me and I have a better understanding of that knowledge.
What revision strategy or strategies do you find most useful when revising your own work and why? And this can be creative or technical or both. What problems or challenges do these activities help you solve?
I generally edit every piece of writing that I have in 3 ways. First, I call it my 3 revisions. The first revision is just reading the piece straight through. Oftentimes, especially when in an editorial role, it becomes very easy to kind of miss the forest for the trees. You start looking for individual grammar things, you start looking at structure, and you kind of cease seeing the writing piece as a whole. And so generally, whenever I'm entering my own writing, somebody else's writing, the first thing I always want to do is I want to read it top to bottom as a potential reader would, just to make sure that I understand what direction the piece is going, what it's trying to convey, and what the takeaways that I as a reader should be having are. Second is structural, similar to how we were talking about before. I go through and be like, okay, does it make the most sense for this idea to be the first one that the reader engages with? If so, awesome, let's move on. And is this the second one? Does it make sense to be here? Or should they be swapped? Should they be merged? Should they be torn apart? Is it like, are ideas 2 and 3 worth standing on their own, or does idea 1 need to be expounded on? Are we moving too fast past the main idea, or do we need to sit there and explore it more and let it really settle and sit? Once I feel content with the structure and that the kind of piece in a holistic manner, that's when the third revision, the super fun one that everybody loves, where we just dive into the nitty gritty and make sure that we have all of our commas in the right place, everything's spelled correctly, we're not splitting any infinitives, and so on and so forth.
Awesome. Those are wonderful revision strategies. Thank you. What's your favorite part of the writing process and why?
It's funny. My dad always told me that I struggled with attention to detail. And me, being at the time a very arrogant teenager, was like, I think you're wrong. I think I have a great attention to detail. Turns out he was right, and that my strength, my favorite part, the part that I excel at, is the idea generation, of being like, okay, in the case of the work I do now, it is here's the idea, or here's what we're trying to target, here's what we're trying to achieve with this piece of writing, be it an email, be it a blog post, be it whatever. Generally, the idea is, what is the most engaging way we can get people to engage with this concept or idea we're trying to hit on? And that, to me, that's my happy place. I love to sit here and be like, okay, it's really easy. There's generally a most obvious, like, okay, if we're writing about, if we're working with a client who sells pools, or that will come in and put a pool in your home, it's very easy to be like, easy ways to have a fun summer, or top 10 ways, very BuzzFeed article-esque, whatever. And there's merit to those, not to knock those at all. But oftentimes there's other engaging ways that can break away from the norm and create a unique reading experience that can make, going back to talking about creating something new and creating something individual and leaving your mark, not just for the client, but also for your own sake, and exploring the ideas a little bit deeper than the surface. And that's where I love to be. That's where I love to think about, like, not just like what we're doing, but how we can do it, and how we can do it in the most, frankly, fun way possible.
Yeah, I really like that part too. I think it's the puzzle of it that appeals to me. What reading suggestions do you have? What authors do you keep in your back pocket?
I am a big fantasy head, so I got a lot of fantasy novels that I really like. As far as like what reading habits do I suggest, or like what reading habits or reading suggestions do I have? I think that reading to a writer is a lot like eating to a chef, right? Where, let's say we want to make like the best spaghetti or burger or whatever. it's really tempting to, as a chef, to really like to hone your craft, to only make burgers, to try new recipes, but ultimately to make the same dish over and over and over again until you feel like you've hit a perfect balance, that you've hit a perfect knowledge of this one thing. But in reality, and this is something that Anthony Bourdain talked about that I really liked, is that the beauty in so many of these crafts is not the perfection of one, even though that can be your goal and that can be something that you can work towards. But it's in the trying new flavors and letting those new flavors influence you and to influence your tastes. To tie that back to writing, it would be like, so in the case that, let's say you're working to become like the best SEO writer or marketing writer that there is, it's very tempting to only read those kinds of articles. So only read the kind of articles that are going to teach you how to best target a keyword, who are going to teach you how to best optimize the web page so that people can find it. That's a good way of doing it. That's a healthy way of doing it. Or not healthy. That is one manner of doing it. But I would argue and suggest that you're going to have a far better experience by having a well explored palate. If you're writing a fantasy novel, go read sci-fi, go read some autobiographies, go read some biology books, go read something that is outside your particular hemisphere, to kind of expand your worldview and to see people's perspectives that are not the ones that you're familiar with, but then also to learn from them. Like learn, if you're writing a fantasy novel, go and read some books on biology so that the world of yours can feel real and the world can feel like it's a real in all the ways that make it feel like some place that you could actually be. If you're writing technically, go read a sci-fi book. Go read a comic book about how just like to craft a narrative and how to move the reader from one idea to the other without losing anything along the way. I think that writing is a beautiful world and reading is a amazing opportunity that we have to explore it. So my advice to all readers, all writers, would be to break out of your comfort zone, read something that you normally wouldn't, and then whenever possible, talk about it. Talk with other people that loved it, talk with people that hate it, talk with anybody and everybody that lets you explore new ideas. Also read Patrick Rothfuss.
Those are wonderful reading suggestions. Thank you so much for making time to do this with me. I've learned so much.
Of course, and thank you for inviting me. This is a wonderful opportunity, and I'm always happy to talk about writing.